in the same manner as provided for assets in the USCF in its Articles of Incorporation. So, where do assets of the USCF go in its Articles of Incorporation? Right now, the Articles of Incorporation have a provision which, by the way, is basically a requirement of the Internal Revenue Service if you're going to be a 501c3, which we aren't, but we've applied to be, that state upon dissolution, your assets will be transferred to another 501c3. So the Articles of Incorporation of the USCF for the last several years have contained a clause that say, upon dissolution of the USCF, its assets are to be distributed to a U.S. 501c3 whose purpose is the promotion of chess in the United States. Okay, so could be any 501c3 upon dissolution, but that would be part of the action that dissolved the organization.
Let me ask Harold a question. If the USCF dissolved, what would happen to the U.S. Chess Trust?
Well, the Chess Trust is a completely independent entity. It would exist. Presumably, it might be a beneficiary. And then, of course, the trust would have to consider whether it could restart something to replace USCF. Our fervent hope, of course, is that's never going to happen. But the trust is completely separate.
So the assets then could wind up going to the U.S. Chess Trust.
That would be a possibility.
Yeah, the mechanics of it, and I'll come back to you, Ken, the mechanics of it, because this had been raised in the committee. How can the USCF be dissolved? Good question. Under Illinois law, there are two mechanisms to dissolve a nonprofit. One of them is a non-member nonprofit can be dissolved by the board of directors of that organization. And there are non-member nonprofits all the time. A nonprofit hospital in your community probably is a non-member nonprofit because you don't buy a membership to the hospital. A member organization, however, to be dissolved in Illinois, must go through a vote of its voting members. And in Illinois law presently, it requires a majority vote of those voting. One can raise that as high as 2/3, but cannot lower it below a majority. And right now, it requires that. We have, in these proposals, made it very clear that that the dissolution will be voted on by the voting members. However, it is a function of Illinois law. But we've codified it in our Articles of Incorporation. That's in the last part of 12.4 and 12.14 and 12.15. Ken, you had your hand up, and I'll come back.
Just a very, very minor point about the wording of item 4 under 80 and 1209. I think you really meant to say the manner as provided for the assets of the USCF in the Articles of Incorporation.
That's actually.
Yes.
Yes. All right, add those words.
Actually, how about if we say assets of the USCF in its Articles of Incorporation?
Yes.
Is that all right?
As it's worded now, it sounds like the Articles of
Yeah.
I get it, totally.
Accept it. We're accepting your word.
I totally get it.
And I will say, plan to go through each of these resolutions in order, and we know that there'll be questions about specific sections when we get there. I'd like to make one general comment and one special comment. If you look at page 17 of your delegate's call on DM 1118, there is a typo. In paragraph 3, it should not be DACI 57, it should be DACI 49 in both line 1 and line 2.
What page?
This is page 17, the third paragraph, and the DACI is on page 44. The more general comment is I want to thank, first of all, Alan for all the work he did with the attorney, which was a great deal of his time, and then he would send stuff to me, and I'd send some comments, which were probably a pain in some cases. And I also want to thank, we had a dinner on a Wednesday night that involved members of the Bylaws Committee and members of the Governor's Task Force, and specifically those there, besides Alan and myself, Guy Hoffman, the co-chair of Bylaws, Myra Lieberman of Arizona, California, Gerald Larson of Alabama, Randy Huff of Southern California, Sivan Maradian of Illinois, USCF President Ruth Herring of Northern Cal, Gary Walters of Ohio, and LMA Chairman Tim Redmond. And the group, worked together to try and get the best wording, which isn't to say that on certain provisions we may be able to improve it here at this workshop, which is one of the purposes of a workshop. My suggestion would be, if we can, that we start going in order with first the 1118 and then the 1209. We'll take votes on certain measures as a whole, and we'll take votes on specifics, especially if there are specific changes. Would that be okay, Alan?
Yeah, that's fine, and then I think there are a couple of other, I think there are a couple of other, some people have mentioned some things that are similar to what you mentioned, Ken, and we'll just incorporate those as we go, and if you have questions about specific provisions as we go, we'll be happy to answer those. We have to move.
Okay, 1118 is on page, it starts at the bottom of page 16, but most of it's on page 17, the text. And please remember that we are deleting the 4th and 5th paragraph.
And the first paragraph.
We're dealing with them elsewhere, and the first paragraph as well. And then I just made that correction in what was the original 3rd paragraph, but it says EACI 49. So what we're doing here is protecting the delegates' right to access official monthly financial reports, even though delegates are no longer the board of directors, and we're spelling out things about the indemnity section, including keeping the provision that delegates are indemnified for his or her acts or omissions at an annual or special meeting of the board of delegates, not for any local or other activity.
And everything below where it says the remaining items would be consistent with the above changes. The changes in Article 9, Section 12, 13, and 14, the only difference between this and the current bylaws is the addition of the word delegates.
Because in the old bylaws,
You can slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
sure.
So let's go from page 16
Well, actually, the text is on page 7.
and 17. Okay, so you're taking out the first paragraph? Is that-
Yes, because we're dealing with changes to the Article of Incorporation in ADM 1215.
I'm asking a factual question.
Yes.
You're taking out the first paragraph. You're not taking out the second paragraph.
Correct.
Correct.
You're not taking out the third paragraph.
Correct.
You're taking out the 4th paragraph.
Yes.
Correct.
You're taking out the 5th paragraph.
Correct.
Okay. Continue slowly, please.
Everything else stays as written here.
Okay. Except there was a.
And then Article 9, the changes that DM 1118 made to Article 9, Section 12, to Article 9, Section 13, and Article 9, Section 14 are simply the addition of the Board of Delegates or delegates to each of those provisions. These are clauses that provide indemnification for acts conducting the official business of the organization. And
Let me just make sure that I'm following you. That basically, these are amendments to wording.
correct.
This wording, like actually 9, Section 12, adds the word executive board of delegates.
To keep the current status of the protection of the delegates for action taken in the annual meeting.
There is no substantive change. Any discussion?
Section 9, Article 9, Section 13.
there other issues here, Tim, or you want to wait a second?
It's up to Harold.
What's the first section you're going to deal with?
I'm going to deal with 1209.
Which section?
People should have their handouts.
And primarily 17, I think.
So number 10.
Okay.
Okay, and by the way, I think that Alan did a spectacular job with this, and it was just Harold and by Don. I mean, he really did a great job with this. I have his oxygen. Harold invited me to the Bylaws Committee workshop because I'm chair of L&A, and I thought we had agreed.
Wait, you just give me the numbers of sections first.
Okay, number 10.
Anything else?
Well, can we start with one at a time?
Well, we could. All right, you want to do 10 first, then we'll go to line 3 and 7.
Okay.
All right.
All right, so number 10. The purpose of the trust is to provide income to the USCF, to provide services to those who purchase life or other your memberships of the USCF. That, I think, is sufficiently clear, but just to nail it down. All right, we did agree that we're talking now not about all of the past life members, but people who are who have purchased life memberships since the Cherry Hill agreement in 2007, right? And I just thought that should, just to be extremely clear about this, I think that we should add this to who have purchased these memberships since 2007.
Tim, if I could make a suggestion as to how to do that,
Yes.
because we indeed talked about it at that meeting, and when I was making the changes later on that evening, I simply missed that. The place to make that change, I think, and I agree with that, by the way, that's not an issue. I think the way to accomplish that is to change item 17. Okay?
Well, 17 will come up.
And
Yes, because that, but I think just to be very clear, this is the Department of Redundancy Department here, and it's very important that we have it as it's just we have an agreement, everything is working. We're working on the Cherry Hill agreement, a famous Bill Hall statement, very good statement, the line in the sand. And so the wording, I would just simply say that it's better to have it in two places than in one place. Just to be perfectly clear, and there is, by the way, there is absolutely no disagreement between operations and L&A.
Okay.
is the right way to word this? And the note that I had made at the meeting, which I didn't get incorporated,
Well, I
was
wrote it down. The right way to word it in 10 and 17 is to say simply, who have purchased since 2007.
And where would you stick that in this wording?
Number 10,
Where is
the
it?
purpose of the trust is to provide income to the USCF, to provide services to those who have purchased life or other multi-year memberships in the USCF since 2007.
is 2007 the right
No.
time?
It's probably 2008.
That's why since January 2008?
I think since January 2008 is correct. And then
January 1st, 2008.
yes, and that's what we're doing. So,
Yeah.
All right, so say
this is just one of those IRS things. How about purchased after December 31, 2006?
That's fine.
All right. 2007.
Instead of since, no, after December 31, 2006.
7. 2007.
7, that's right, right.
All right. Go with the after December 31st.
We have no problem whatsoever, the only, has no problem whatsoever, with having the, for finance.
I think we accept that amendment.
Yeah, 13.
We'll hold it before we move on.
Sorry.
Anything on that specific?
I want to go back to 10 very briefly.
All right, on 10, Gary and Ken.
Do we really need to say multi-year memberships? Because we have a large number of non-life memberships that are multi-year memberships.
Kim, does LMA get money from you on multi-year?
I would, is Joan Anna here?
No, the only one they get are life and sustaining at the present. at this
Okay,
time.
then I think Gary is correct.
All right.
Life and sustaining. I think that's good, yes.
And thank you, Michael.
Do we sell sustained membership?
Life and
We can accept the May of sold it since
Yeah,
December
that's very good. I
And
missed
then 17 is going to change according.
17.
get rid of a multi-year and just say life or sustaining.
Correct.
Yeah,
And
that's
sustained.
Correct.
life and sustaining.
No problem.
Thank you.
Incidentally, the effective point of the Cherry Hill agreement was September 2007.
So,
September 2007.
so since September 30, 2007?
September 1,
We
2007.
started in 2008.
Okay.
That's where we started.
So we're changing 17 the same way. We would
Correct.
purchase life and sustaining.
You know, from a practical standpoint, honestly, if it was really started October 1, it isn't going to make much difference because we're already doing it.
Right.
You know, so that's less important, probably being precise there than just making sure it's there.
Okay.
Ken wanted to comment.
I had another point.
Well, Ken had a question here.
Ken said his hand up.
Ken?
I actually have significant concerns about adding this wording. I understand the point of this wording is that in Cherry Hill 2007, we reached an agreement where the money paid to the USCF for life memberships was to be allocated this much to LMA and the rest of operations. But if I were to just read the proposed language, I would be concerned that now you are setting up two different classes of life membership. And this wording suggests to me that if the USCF falls into dire financial situations, the income from the LMA trust will pay the USCF's obligation to those relatively new life members, but to the existing life members before 2007, tough cookies, pal. I am concerned by that language.
I think this does not limit this. The obligations to the life members are well recognized by the real estate clause. So I don't share your concern.
And the practical matter fact is that at present, the USCF operations does not receive any money in support of member life
it's supposed to be, because can I indulge you in that? If you pick up the handout for 1214, one thing that we made very clear to reserve in the Articles of Incorporation for the Board of Delegates was the right to approve the sale, exchange, or other transfer of real estate.
Correct.
So, yeah, so I wanted to make sure that that's why we did that, so that that would
All right,
say.
thank you, Tim. We accept that. We
Your
accept that.
intent is quite clear.
We accept that.
And I pretty much,
That's why we made that in 14 and 15.
Thank you for catching that. Yes, that's good. That's all right. Anything else you've got before we?
Now, let me address one other issue. The item 14 is what is codified currently about borrowing.
correct.
That's just pulled straight out of the bylaws as to how that functions
And
now.
it's working well.
All right, now I've also taken out a couple of major sub-issues here, and I'd like the workshop to take both sides. The first one, we agree that the trust should be revocable. Alan has given the reasons. Any discussion on that before we take the vote? Yes.
You were talking about the ability to amend. You specifically addressed how to dissolve it. Is there any other ability to amend in any other ways? Does the town come up, change number of trustees, whatever issue came up? Or is that fully in the hands of the trustees, Dan?
No, it isn't. It is absolutely not in the hand of the trustees. The trustees don't have the power to amend the trust at all. And that's a good point, because we added this after the Wednesday night dinner. Item number 3 probably needs to say maybe revoked or amended. Or does need to say revoked or amended.
Item number 3 where?
In 12.9,
It may be revoked or amended.
By the delegate board of governors.
Provided the proposal to revoke or amend.
Yeah, okay.
Powers in the hands
All right.
of the grantor.
so under, I'm sorry,
Powers in the hands of the grantor.
right. And so if we take item number 3 in 12-9 and the provision in 12-10, that language mirrors what is in the trust document. It's on the last page of the handout that says 12-9 at the top,
So it would be revoked.
or amended there.
Okay. All right, does everyone have those changes that were made?
Thank you for noticing that.
Yeah, that's very good again. Well, that's one of the purposes of this workshop. Is we've got all these people here, we can improve it so to the floor. So item 3 now reads the trust may be revoked or amended by the USCF Board of Delegates by a 2/3 vote, provided that a proposal to revoke or amend is included in the delegate's advance agenda. That's item 3 in 1209. And we're also changing 1210 on the 3rd page of that handout, saying when a trust has been established for the management of life member assets, the trust can only be revoked or amended by a 2/3 vote of the delegates, provided that a proposal to revoke or amend is included in the delegation as agenda. All right, we've got very good suggestions here. All right, back on.
Yeah, change the last line too, Harold.
I'm sorry.
Change the last line too. Upon revocation or amendment.
No, we do not.
No, because amendment would not lead all assets to go to the USCF. It's still the existing. All right, so Richard.
So before you go on to those, on item number 11 on the 12-9, I mentioned that one, but maybe we should have a line there that says that the rent shall not exceed market rates essentially.
That's interesting. I don't think it's necessary. We haven't charged rent forever.
Yeah,
And we're not going to charge rent as long as I'm chair, because that's just part of the agreement we've all reached, that pretty much the rent is,
right, I mean, it would have been harmed in a line like that.
It would seem to me that charging exorbitant rent would be a violation of the charter of the trust.
But there's no reason why it could.
No, but
Well, bankrupting your beneficiary doesn't sound like a good way of operating.
may be true. but
Gary?
it's still-
The way that this is written is very, very smart. The trustees need not require. That's a very, very suggestive and important phrase. All right, that indicates that more or less shouldn't, but doesn't forbid it. But so I think.
If I could comment, yeah, Richard, remember the trustees have a one-year term, the delegates re-elect. If the trustees start charging exorbitant rent, they'll probably all compute it out. And the next delegate.
Right. It is as a matter of law, I'm not sure you could charge higher than market rate. And as you said, the trustee terms for 10 of the 11 trustees are only a year, and they can be replaced by the delegates at the annual delegates meeting or at any special meeting the delegates might call to do that. So, they can, the trustees serve as women of the delegate. Further, if, the problems on the EB side, we're coming into a phase where we'll do EB elections every year. So we'll be replacing at least part of the EB potentially replacing at least part of the EB every year, starting in 2013.
I do want to take some specific votes here for the guidance meeting. Can we proceed to the first?
You have a question here?
I think he's ready to know. I think there's a miswording in Article 12 here. It says again, USCF Board of Directors, and I think it means Board of Delegates.
No, it actually doesn't. That really does mean the board of directors.
Okay.
Yeah, I brought this up with Alan before, and it really does mean the voting members.
That really does mean the board of directors in item 12. The trustees cannot go out on their own and borrow. The only way they can borrow is with prior approval of the board of directors. And that's because you have to have the board of directors in that mix somewhere. Now, we also have a bylaw provision that says but see, that's not borrowing on real estate. That's borrowing. Borrowing on real estate requires the operation of delegates, but not just if they were to go borrow money. And here's what has happened. The provision that happens is, which has happened, that the LMA has agreed for certain of their assets to be used as collateral for line of credit borrowing, and this is exactly how it has functioned. The word in the existing bylaw says executive board. So we've changed executive board to board of directors because that's who it will be.
All right, again, I'd like to take a series of votes. The first one, do we agree that it should be a revocable trust? I'll count this side, I'll count the other side. Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 25. All opposed, please raise your hand. All abstentions, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 2,
Okay. Do we agree on the next in section 3 that revocation, being a very serious matter, should require a 2/3 vote of delegates? Any discussion before we vote? Revocation or amendments, that's right. Very good.
And actually, the clause is more than a 2/3 vote. No, it's 2/3 vote and that must be published in the advance agenda.
All right.